With the return of Bleach, we are introduced to the final arc, the 1000-Year Blood War, and right off the bat, you can tell that this is different from the rest of Bleach. The first episode truly set the tone for the rest of the series. From what we got, we could tell this would be a more ominous, violent, and bloody Bleach, just as the name of the arc suggests. One thing this episode did better than all others was its ability to create a suspenseful atmosphere, which I will discuss more of soon. This video will cover the first episode of the 1000-Year Blood War, and it will not have any spoilers for the rest of the arc. I will include some information that will help you better understand the characters and what happened in the episode. So if you haven't seen Bleach in a while or need a refresher, this is the video for you. I will also be dropping obscure bits of lore here and there, so there will be things for experienced fans as well. At the start, we hear a very cryptic story of sorts, talking about the Quincy King. We hear how he regains his pulse after 900 years, his mind after 90 years, his strength after 9 years, and then we are suddenly cut off by a menacing man with a mustache who grabs a Quincy cross. The fact that we ended on "and" shows us that the story was not finished, and this leaves us with tension about what could come next. It brings up the question that maybe all that he said has happened, and that could be why the story was not finished, because the Quincy King has yet to act on whatever is left. From there, we are taken to the R&D squad's department, and we see them scrambling during a high-level threat. Hollows have been dropping at considerable rates, disturbing the balance of the realms. Early on in Bleach, we learn that if too many souls were eliminated, it will disturb the balance of the world and disrupt the flow of souls from the different realms, eventually causing all the realms to merge into one. In this case, the mass eradication of Hollows began to disrupt the balance of souls, and so this was a massive problem. There is a new looming threat, and it is moving at a rate faster than we have ever seen in Bleach. With the suspense rising, Mayuri concludes that it could only be them. Mayuri, of course, was referring to the Quincy, the only race who openly seeks to eliminate Hollows. We learned at the start of Bleach that Quincy and Soul Reapers had many conflicts in regards to the methods in dealing with Hollows. But the Quincy were thought to be exterminated long ago, with only a few survivors like Uryu and Ryukin. This event, as well as many other scenes in this episode, hints at the resurgence of a grand scale of a once thought to be endangered race. We are then taken to Karakura town, and we see someone with a Quincy cross launching some sort of powder in the air. At this point, it is hard to comprehend what this is, but only later on do we understand that this was in fact hollow bait, something we saw a certain Quincy use at the start of Bleach. From there, we are introduced to 3 Soul Reapers: Zenosuke Kuromadani, the rather incompetent Soul Reaper who was in charge of Karakura town, as well as 2 newcomers, Shino Madarame and Ryunosuke Yuki. Kuromadani would leave the 2 as his successors, and they will continue their duties together, so that the Soul Society ironically won't rely on Ichigo so much. All 3 of these Shinigamis are lower members of Squad 13. All the Soul Reapers in charge of Karakura town were in fact under Squad 13, with Rukia being the other one. The only exceptions we know of would be the substitute Soul Reapers, Ichigo Kurosaki and Ginja Kugo, who, although were not a part of Squad 13, were still heavily monitored through their Soul Reaper badge by Ukitake. Before I go further, let's talk a bit about the 2 characters we were introduced to. This section will give you a better idea of who these 2 are, and it will feature minor interactions from the light novels that are spoiler-free from the main events of 1000-Year Blood War and Can't Fear Your Own World. So feel free to skip forward if you're not interested in these 2. Let's start off with Shino. From the first interaction in the anime, we could tell Shino is the more confident, proud, and brash Soul Reaper of the 2. She is a hot-headed character and she is very eager to head off to battle, as seen by her splitting up from Ryunosuke. When hearing the aforementioned description, you could say that she is very similar to a particular Soul Reaper, and through the light novel series of Can't Fear Your Own World, we find out that Shino is in fact related to Ikkaku, who both share the same last name. Shino is said to be the sister or cousin of Ikkaku, but it is not clear, as some texts stated that both of them don't even know how they are related. Next up, we got Ryunosuke, who is very reminiscent of another fan favorite in Hanataro Yamada. Both Ryunosuke and Hanataro have similar personalities in being soft, insecure, and rather scared of everything around them. Both are nervous wrecks, but Hanataro is more of an expert in his field and sports a higher rank in his squad. Ryunosuke does have a brother whom we have actually seen before, and he also has some history with Hanataro. His brother is Rikichi Yuki, an officer of Squad 6 under Byakuya. We first see Rikichi in the Soul Society arc as a massive Renji fanboy. Renji was Rikichi's main inspiration for becoming a Soul Reaper, and Rikichi would go as far as to copy Renji's tribal tattoos in honor of his hero. Although Ryunosuke is an anxious wreck compared to his brother and everyone else, his brother is shown to be confident while having more guts, as he once broke Hanataro out of jail so that he could heal Renji after his battle with Byakuya. Funny enough, Rikichi's brother would turn into a spitting image of the man he broke out of jail. One final story I would like to share about the two was an odd/funny one from Can't Fear Your Own World. In one of the many instances of Ryunosuke crying, Shino would compare him to his brother, Rikichi, a high-ranking, more reliable Shinigami, in an effort to bring some sense into Ryunosuke. Ryunosuke would then spill a bunch of dirt on his brother, saying how he once chopped pickles with Renji's Zanpakuto and got a teacup thrown at him because of that. That had nothing to do with this video, but I just felt it was a funny sight to imagine, and I didn't think I would ever get the chance to talk about it. Anyways, although both Shino and Ryunosuke are related to higher ranking seated officers, they both are the lesser and more inexperienced counterparts, who also have contrasting personalities from each other. As opposites, Shino and Ryunosuke tend to balance each other out when together, with one being impulsive and aggressive, and the other being risk-adverse and passive. Now back to the anime. Ryunosuke would come across terrifying hollows. Like seriously, they're actually scary this time around. And after running for his life to get help from Shino, he would finally come across her. He would find Shino unconscious, bloodied up in the hands of a massive hollow. In response, he would nervously draw his sword, only to be sliced up by the hollow chasing him earlier on. From here, we see the dark reality of the lower ranking Soul Reapers. We are so used to seeing Shinigami from the lens of the best. But for lower ranking Shinigami, it is always a fight to the death. Every day could be your last, and this scene portrayed that well. Luckily for the two, they are in a town of absolute legends, surrounded by a group that eats hollows for breakfast, and they are saved by Ichigo and the Karakura gang. After 10 long years, we finally see the group in action. We see Orihime healing the two with her abilities, and what stands out the most is the improvements in the animation. All the characters look, much bigger and better, and that is shown through the gang doing what they do best, with Orihime rejecting some weebs, and even Chad committing mass murder. But honestly, who gives a shit about all those deaths, because Bleach is back, baby! We get to see La Muerte's skull imprint in its up-to-date glory. We even get to see Orihime's bread. And let's not forget about the other two. We see the elegant and vibrant Quincy abilities from Uryu, the slick Hirinkyaku, and his flashy leaked Rinnegan, and even the patented Getsuga Tensho, which is black, despite the different colors used in the trailer, and of course a Bankai from Ichigo, with him flaunting his insane power. From there, the next scene is in the Soul Reaper's headquarters in Karakura town, Ichigo's room. We see Orihime bringing some bread, and the gang continues the banter we grew to love in the past. After Ryunosuke screams as many times as he breathes, we see Shino as well, and find out that the two are in one piece after their hollow attack. While Shino and Ryunosuke brawl it out, Ichigo asks for their names, and this would be the bridge to the next scene. Out of the window comes Asugiyaro Iburn, a man sporting an Arrancar mask, who does not like to be referred to as one. Iburn stands on Ichigo's bed, introducing himself, and in response, Ichigo would eventually kick him out of his window. The last few scenes really shows you how close-knit this group is. You can tell they have been lifelong friends just by how they act, and they are even able to read each other's next actions. This is best seen through Orihime reading the situation well enough to open the window, so that Iburn is launched outside. They all work as a cohesive unit. Well, most of the time. After kicking out Iburn, you see a look of concern. On Uryu's face, which means a lot. Uryu is an incredibly capable person, and some scrub Arrancars would be of no concern to him. Furthermore, Uryu is easily the most perceptive one there, and many past occasions show that. He was skeptical of the Substitute Soul Reaper's badge far before anyone else. His spiritual perception abilities were way higher than Ichigo's. And we saw that with him showing up to battles before Ichigo. We also saw this through the spirit ribbons, which consequently were never used after the Soul Society arc. All of this adds to the suspense of the episode. as it shows you that something is not right. As Ichigo confronts the man he just kicked, he finds out that he has a Quincy's cross and even a bow. This helps you better understand the scene earlier in the episode. The Quincy who put out the hollow bait could have possibly been Ebern, and his objective could have very well been to draw out/scout Ichigo and his gang. At the same time in Rukongai, we see Yumin Chika and Ikkaku investigating the disappearance of souls from Rukongai, which is followed by a shot from Mayuri's department that says clear. This scene is accompanied by a barn burner in the Squad 1 barracks. The scene starts with a flash and chaos ensues after that. Yamamoto recalls that the flash was of his lieutenant, Chojuro Sasakibe, hinting that he was in conflict. A few seconds after, a subordinate tries to speak to Yama, but is cut off, literally, as his head was cut off. We are then introduced to a mysterious masked group who have come to declare war. Just as this starts, the imperial music starts to play, as if an army is gradually marching towards war. Ichigo is fighting with Ebern, while Yama is discoursing with the intruders in his own calm and stoic way. After a badass line saying that, "I have nothing to fear, I am here. There is no greater security than that," we are interrupted by Chojuro Sasakibe, who comes in flying, fatally impaled by an arrow. Sasakibe, who was in his Shikai state, had one of his arms missing, as he remained transfixed on the wall with blood dripping everywhere. A few seconds ago, Yamamoto had noticed a flash that reminded him of Chojuro, and in less than a minute, Chojuro was sent flying toward Yamamoto in fatal condition. Whoever this group was, they were not here to play around, as even Yama's words earlier were easily discredited with his right-hand man showing up defeated in such a bloody state. The mysterious group would leave a message saying that 5 days from now, the Soul Society would be eliminated by the Wandenreich, and they would disappear from thin air, just as Yama would use his flash step and show off his monstrous power. All the while, Ichigo is battling his opponent, and he notices that he is just playing around. His opponent clearly wants him to go Bankai. What we see next is one of the best directed scenes in Bleach, which is riddled with suspense. As Ichigo decides to play his opponent's game and go Bankai, we get a back and forth scene between their fight and Sasakibe struggling to give Yamamoto some important news. He mentioned how our enemies can do something with their Bankai, and Ebern will finish his sentence by saying to Ichigo that your Bankai ends here. We also see this cute face, which honestly made me laugh out loud in such a tense moment, but the back and forth action really kept you glued to the scene, wondering what will happen next. Ebern then takes out a medallion, and as Ichigo goes Bankai, we witness a massive amount of power summoned by the medallion, something we haven't seen before, followed by some epic German lines. A rough translation of his words would be, "Sea become clouds, clouds become rain, rain become mist, all things have a shape, vanish. We rejoice and lay down our goblets." The rain in particular plays an important part in Bleach, and so the fact that these lines talk about the rain is very interesting. I'll be making a separate video on the rain soon enough, so I'll save the conversation for then. Ichigo's body would seem to start to break apart, but he would eventually overcome this mysterious power and strike back against the surprised Ebern. Ebern, frustrated, will reply, why wouldn't his Bankai disappear? And he would end up escaping through the same shadows as those who confronted head Captain Yama. These last few scenes show us that this is leading to be a war on all fronts. This is no measly invasion, but one that transcends realms. Issues are popping up everywhere, and this is a dark omen to come through the battles and all the chaos brought upon in such a short period. It shows us that this was a calculated attack by the Quincy. A ruthless set of attacks with the idea to send a message. The goal of this group to walk in, kill the captain's right-hand man like it's nothing, and declare that in 5 days they will take over is incredibly brash, bold, and quite terrifying. Bleach has run on manipulators, puppeteers scheming from the shadows, but this group seems to be way more direct, despite also employing the shadows. So far, only those who had a well-thought, cunning plan could upset the control the Soul Society had on the world, but this time, they're openly challenged, and that alone holds some merit to the new enemy's strength. Rather than striking the Soul Reapers when they are least expecting it, this group gives them a warning, so that they can fight them at their best. To do something like this, you either have to be crazy like Kenpachi, or incredibly confident and proud of your abilities, like Kenpachi again. The Wandenreich do not want to just win, but they want to embarrass the Soul Society by beating them at their best. From this, you can understand that we are not in for an invasion like we are used to seeing, but a full-scale, brutal and bloody war. The bridge to the next scene would be seen through the shadows, and from there we are introduced to a massive fortress, the hideout of the group known as the Wandenreich. We see a member of the group without a mask, as well as Ebern, both of whom are Arrancars. While the Arrancar mocks Ebern, his arm is ripped apart with ease by a man sitting on a throne in front of him. He would reply by saying, "How many times must I remind you? Do not argue in my presence. I dislike conflict. Now let me hear your report for the cause of peace." This was the end of the episode, and the last dialogue brings up some questions. How can someone who dislikes conflict easily rip off his subordinate's arm like it's nothing? Perhaps it's hypocrisy, or just a power move to set his subordinates straight. Or maybe, in his mind, his subordinates are just disposable pawns for him to use. We know these characters are Arrancars, so maybe only Arrancars are treated this way. Or maybe everyone is treated the same. Maybe he truly does hate conflict despite his actions. I'm sure we will find out more in the future, and I can even make a video discussing this further. All in all, this episode felt different from what we previously got from Bleach. Mainly things being faster paced with a different animation style. Bleach has announced around 52 episodes for the Thousand Year Blood War. With the manga of the Thousand Year Blood War spanning 206 chapters, that will average around 4 chapters per episode. Generally, 2 chapters per episode are more common in anime, so just off that, you can expect this arc to be incredibly action-packed. Furthermore, Kubo stated that he wanted to add content that he didn't have time to add in the manga. So at the same time, expect some new content to be added in the future. The first episode fit in 5 chapters in total, from chapter 480 to 484. This episode also cut some scenes from the manga. I believe this was so that they can focus on new aspects / perspectives and add content later down the series to make it feel more balanced, which was the main criticism the series had near the end. Since we had 5 chapters covered in this episode, it is safe to say that we can expect some new content in the future, since we have gone one above the average chapters per episode. I did mention the various bridges from one scene to another in this video, and I noticed these transitions were incredibly clean and short. This is what kept our eyes glued to the screen, and it ultimately allowed them to fit as much content as possible. I think it's safe to say that we will get similar cool transitions in future episodes. Furthermore, this episode did a great job of introducing mysterious elements and slowly revealing them. We see this through the holobait, Chojiro's flash, his words, and a bunch of other times this was employed in this episode. A lot was shown in this episode, and a lot was left to interpretation to make the most out of the time limit. I believe this made for a more mysterious and tension-filled episode, and the pacing really helped in that regard. In addition, I do want to talk about the beautiful original soundtrack that Bleach always has before I end off. The soundtrack was amazing throughout the episode, and I expected nothing less with Shiro Sagisu in charge. Some of the themes used resembled previous themes, with a new flair to them. We had number 1, which was a more hyped and upbeat version, but everything else was very ominous. Not your usual relaxed and fun tunes, but dark, suspense-ridden themes. The music gave off the feeling of an Imperial Army's march, the war cry of the Quincy, and the constant turning of the gears of war, showing the dire situations to come. Expect more epic, heavy brass and percussion themes to come in future episodes. All that said, what was your favorite part of this episode, and what were your thoughts on it overall? Let me know what else you may want me to cover in future videos, and I'll do my best to make this a weekly series, so see you all next week.